God wanted it to be clear who Jesus was. He wanted someone to be so dead that nobody would be able to take the glory. For some of you, it's possible that God has allowed your situation to become so dead that when He resurrects it, there will be no doubt who did it. When God gives you a word, light goes with that word. At some point, anxiety and worry begins to set in because Lazarus is disintegrating in their eyes. Then at some point, the unthinkable happens. Lazarus takes his last breath. His sisters are in shock. I thought Jesus said He was coming. How? We know Him. He does not lie. Can't happen. But we prayed. We sent word. We even received word that He said He was coming. He said He will not end in death. And this wasn't like we have today where you're able to call people to be like, where is He? They had no idea where He was. Jesus was in Galilee. They were in Bethany, which is 30 minutes, 45 minutes away from Jerusalem. This was like a 2-3 day journey. They didn't know where He was. And so I imagine people have come in. They're trying to take Lazarus's body away to prepare it for burial. They're hesitant. They're like, wait. Like, give us a few more hours. Like, He might still come. We've heard Him raise the dead in the past. If He comes now, there's still a possibility. They probably heard of Jairus' daughter. He healed her on the same day. They probably heard about the woman whose only son had died. He hadn't gotten into the tomb yet. There's still hope. Let's wait. People are like, you've lost your mind. This guy is gone. Like, it's time to mourn. It's time to... And apparently there was a Jewish superstition back in the day that people could still be raised back to life within 3 days. There's a possibility that this is why Jesus waited until the fourth day. He wanted to leave no doubt. Jesus was nowhere in sight. At some point, Mary and Martha, they've held on for so long. They're like, you know what? He's gone. He's gone. It's time. You can take His body now. He's gone. There's no way He can come back. At this point, as they bury Him, they put Him in the tomb. They cry. They remember the memories. This is their brother. They're remembering themselves, memories of them growing up. If you've ever mourned somebody before, you know what it feels like. You're like, we didn't get to... It's possible they were having regrets. They didn't get to tell him things that they wanted to tell him. Because in their mind, he was going to be raised, he was going to be healed. But unknown to them, when Jesus received this message, He also received a signal from heaven that God wanted to use this situation for His revelation. Because people had seen Him heal the sick. They had also heard about Him raising the dead on the same day. They had heard about Him raising people before they would get into the tomb. But this time around, God wanted it to be clear who Jesus was. He wanted someone to be so dead that nobody would be able to take the glory. For some of you, it's possible that God has allowed your situation to become so dead that when He resurrects it, there will be no doubt who did it. He wanted it to be clear. When I heard about this, it's like he had been in the tomb for 4 days. I had to do some research that what happens to the body after 4 days. The body begins to decompose. It begins to disintegrate. The enzymes in your body begins to kill everything inside. So it says, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. So when he heard the message, kept quiet. 2 days after, he then reveals to his disciples that let's go back to Judea. Judea? You can imagine the disciples, they're like, Judea? Just a few days ago, they were trying to kill you. What do you mean let's go back to Judea? Verse 8 says, but Rabbi, they said, a short while ago, the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back? Let this thing calm down for a bit, man. Like they are still angry. You called yourself, you said you and your father, you and God are one. They are still very upset. If we go back now, it's still going to be fresh. Now, Jesus responds here, and I've never understood this before until today. Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. What was Jesus trying to say here? When God gives you a word, light goes with that word. When you obey that word, it cannot kill you. When you're walking in the will of God, nothing can happen to you that God hasn't approved. He says we have 12 hours of daylight. Remember, he knew he was on a leash. His time was coming to an end. At this point, he was probably at the 11th hour, because a couple weeks after, he was going to be killed. He said, God has given a word. We need to go while it's still daylight. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble. So it is when you are walking in ignorance that you begin to stumble, that you begin to make mistakes, that there is the possibility of you dying before your time, because they have no light. After he had said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. I love how Jesus, you see, your words shape your mind. Your words shape your expectations. When Jairus' daughter had died, he said, don't worry, she's just asleep, because if she's asleep, we can wake her up. To Jesus, whether you're asleep or dead, you're asleep, because I'm the resurrection and the life. But he was trying to get the disciples to understand. Don't let fear. But his disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. Like, it's going to take us about 2-3 days to get to Lazarus' place. Like, what do you mean we're going to wake him up? People who sleep wake up on their own. But Jesus understood, they're not getting it. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. So it means that the disciples at this point, obviously they didn't believe he was the Messiah fully. They had glimpses here and there, but he's like, after this one, you guys will believe. So let's go to him. Now, Thomas, also known as Didymus, and Didymus means twin. So it's possible that Thomas may have been a twin, but his nickname or his surname was twin. So not sure where that's coming from. So Thomas, we know him as Doubting Thomas because that's the only story we've heard about him. But look at how Thomas responds here. Thomas said to the rest of the disciples, they were about to go back to Judea where they were possibly going to, this was like a suicide mission basically, because they're like, they tried to kill you. There's a reason why we escaped. Now we are going back into the lion's den. We are going back to the heat of the situation. Thomas said to the disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. This is a suicide mission, but we're willing to take the risk. We are following Jesus. We are committed to Jesus even till the end. This gives us a different perspective on the life of Thomas. I'm not going to be calling Doubting Thomas anymore, man. Let's not stereotype people based on one moment in their life, maybe their weakest moment. Let's try to raise them up to their strongest moments. Even with Martha as well, you're going to see what I mean. And so on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. And it says now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. So it means that Lazarus may have been more influential than we originally thought. Like, people were coming all the way from Jerusalem to Bethany to pay their respect 4 days after he had died. Not even after he had died, 4 days after he had been put in the tomb. He was probably dead before he was put in the tomb. So it says when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Now, when Martha heard that Jesus had come or was coming, it means that somebody must have seen him and his disciples approaching, and then they go and tell Martha he is coming. So the moment Jesus arrives, Martha approaches him. She goes to meet him. And verse 21 says, Martha says, Lord, she said, if you had been here, my brother would have not died. To her, Jesus, she's trying to be respectful. Remember, she's mourning at this point, but she's also trying to be respectful. That from my timeline, from my perspective, you are 4 days late. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. She thought Jesus was 4 days late from her perspective, but Jesus was right on time from heaven's perspective. But Martha said something here that I was a bit confused. Did she believe? Check this. Because after Martha said, if you had been here, my brother would not have died, she then says, but I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. What does she mean here? Because initially when I read it, I was like, was she saying that you are still able to heal him or raise him from the dead now? But as I began to meditate, I was like, nah, it can't be, because when Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again, Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. So I'm like, there's no way she would have thought that Jesus was able to raise him now. Plus, when they got to the tomb and Jesus told them to roll away the stone, she stopped him, that his body will be smelling. So it means, based on that, because there's a different response you have if you truly believe that Jesus was going to heal or to raise him from the dead. It says, I believe that God will give you whatever you ask, and Jesus says, your brother will rise again. Should be like, let's go to the grave. Let's go. There would have been a different response. So as I began to meditate on this, I realized that what she was saying, check this, I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Whatever you ask. What she was saying here was, you are still the same in my eyes, even though my brother has died. You are still the same God, even though you did not come on my timeline. I still trust in you. I still believe you regardless. I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. And then Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. She couldn't have believed. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. You see, up until this point, people were putting Jesus in a box. When they would see Jesus as a teacher, they would struggle to believe that Jesus could heal. When they would see Jesus heal somebody one way, they would struggle with believing that he could heal another way. Jesus broke the box. He said, the fact that I came late, according to you, because you saw me as a healer, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. He now asks her, do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied, I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. He said, I'm the resurrection and the life. Do you believe this? She went off on a tangent. I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God. Do you believe I'm the resurrection and the life, Martha? After she has said this, I believe he now tells her, where's Mary? Because when she went back and called her sister Mary aside, the teacher is here, she said, and is asking for you. So that conversation wasn't captured. But he must have said, and where's your sister Mary? And so Martha goes to find Mary. And when Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now, Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. So he stood there, waited. And when the Jews who had been with Mary in the house comforting her noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. And when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. The same thing. So it means she didn't even have time to have a conversation with Martha. She immediately left and went. She wanted an explanation. Why didn't you come? What happened? If you had been here, this situation would be different. And I struggled with this story. I remember the first time I read it, and I struggled with it because I was like, verse 33 says, when Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him in? He asked. Come and see. The Lord, they replied, and Jesus wept. In my mind, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Jesus knew that he was coming to resurrect him or to resuscitate him. In other words, why would you weep knowing that he was going to be raised a few minutes later? Have you ever thought about that? That question has always bugged me for years. I'm like, why? You knew, like, you waited. And I think it was recently that the Holy Spirit sort of began to show me, it's like you're reading it from your perspective. You're reading it from your prideful perspective. Because when I read this initially, I imagined myself, I'm like, I'm going to show these guys. I'm going to show them. But like a magic trick, like just wait until like I realized I was reading it from my perspective. But Jesus, seeing the consequence of sin, seeing pain, people in pain. You see, when he saw the woman whose son had died, he says he had compassion. So seeing them, one of the things that Holy Spirit showed me is a lot of us like to live either in the future or in the past, but we don't live in the present. We focus on where we'll be in the next 10 years or what we did 10 years ago, but we ignore the next 10 seconds of our lives. A lot of us don't live present. Someone is talking to you, you're listening because you're already planning your response. You're not really listening to what they're saying in the moment. You're not being present. Jesus was present. He wasn't thinking that I'm going to heal him in the next few minutes. He was present with them. He was feeling what they were feeling. He was with them in the pain. And that pain caused him to feel a certain way, to the point where the Jews said, see how he loved him. It brought tears to his eyes. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? And this is the attitude of a lot of people. We've turned God into a genie. And if he did that, then he can do this, or he should do this. There's no awareness of if what we're asking for also aligns with his will for our lives or his timing for our lives. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this clip and you want to know how to hear from God using the Bible, I'd love to invite you to a live Bible study session that is happening every single day, Monday to Friday, 5 to 6 p.m. EST, where I show you how to not just read the Bible for information, but how to meditate on it for revelation, because revelation is the key to your transformation. Take care. Bye-bye.